Thank you, Kadri, and welcome back to the program. I'm extremely excited to bring what's probably one of the most intriguing questions in defense innovation, and that is the contrast between the systems that are agile, that work, that have proven to be effective, being challenged by those that are maybe, challenged with much more controversy, much less experience, and all of that. Naturally, what we have today is the US versus European defense innovation systems. Sigute, Scott, thank you for being with us today. And let me quickly kind of pick your brains and ask for the kind of introduction. Defense innovation system clearly work very differently in US and Europe. One being one large federal system where you can consolidate the purchases and the innovation mechanism that drive corporate interest and also maybe academic interest, as opposed to European-led innovation system, multi-governance, multiple countries, different approaches, different understanding of acuteness of the situation. Can you shortly characterize respectively US and EU systems and underline what do you most envy about the other? Sigute, can we start with you, please?
Yeah, sure. So thank you for having me here. I'm very excited to be part of Delta 2025 as well as CDL. My experience is, of course, based on Lithuania the most and European innovation ecosystems. But I'm in a very interesting position because now I'm sort of transitioning to US and working for a US defense company. So I can see the most advantages and disadvantages. And being the one who helped to build defense innovation system in Lithuania and now the one who is approaching as a startup, I can see what are the gaps. So I think that the major, the major example and the major problem in Europe is that it's our mindset, how we think about the startups, what we think about the startups, and what do we think about new technologies, and the lack of trust maybe sometimes in companies. And that's, of course, the military is a very closed system. You have to be reliable, you have to earn their trust to be able to approach, and it's the main key factor as well, because the innovation system will not work if it is not combined to the procurement. So in Europe we have 27 different systems, different organizations that work with. On top of that we have European Defence Fund, we have various programs that basically combines R&D, innovation, and then it's a separate organization that manages the procurement. It's national procurement agencies for the defense. So that makes probably the main issue and the main problem, that R&D projects are not aligned with the procurement lines and the needs that the military has. That's why in Europe we produce a lot of R&D results that really turns into the procurement and the products that actually military uses.
So would you say it's the cohesion and the translational bit to actually transform the R&D findings into actionable weapon systems or whatever the defense deterrence instruments are required?
Yes, and I can see that US is doing this very well.
Scott?
Right, well, great comments, and I think there's as much similarity as there is difference. We all have trouble getting new young technology into established organizations. I think in Europe the main blocker may be the military. I get a sense talking to them that they're the professionals and they don't want to be told how to do their job or that something could be different. In the US it tends to be the prime contractors and the acquisition side of our defense establishment. If anything, we're just a little bit more mature at doing this than Europe. Europe is sort of just getting started in the last year or two with the invasion of Ukraine and this recognition that they're going to have to change things. In the US, it started all the way back in 2015, 2016, when then Secretary of Defense Ashton Carter started the Defense Innovation Unit as a realization that we were kind of falling behind in technology. He was supported and pushed by then Senator John S. McCain, who brought together a lot of financiers, James Cross at Franklin Templeton, who started the Silicon Valley Defense Group and helped us get started down at UC San Diego, who was key in that. Since then, there's been sort of a large marshaling of private capital. I think the number is somewhere around $400 billion has been committed in private capital to get these young companies jump-started and in. There still is a barrier. When you look at our defense procurement, it hasn't changed a great deal over those years in terms of the amount of actual contracts, not the innovation money that's going to these startup companies. So we have work to do, but if anything, I'd say it's this, a little bit more mature in the private capital market that is there to support these companies, a little bit more awareness and willingness, thanks to both political and professional pressures on the military side of adopting and implementing them, and then a growing need that if we don't do this, we're going to just continue to fall further behind.
What we've seen in Europe is the emergence of kind of dual-use VCs and private equity companies tapping into exactly that, well, market opportunity for them, but really what's a critical capability building for the European societies. Clearly, access to capital clearly is an advantage in US as compared to EU. But trust towards Sigute, what you mentioned, and Scott, I think what you underlined very clearly is that there is an underlying difference how the two approaches trust private innovators. And we've seen that it is much stronger in the US. John Rendon, in his earlier talk, elegantly explained that we may understand public and the requirements for public-private partnership, but do we really actually understand that? How do we build that trust? Scott?
I think you have to do it by just making the opportunities available. You have to do it through exercises. You do it through bringing the two communities together and letting them learn how each other operate, what their constraints are, what their incentive and value systems are. The more, certainly on the operational side of the U.S. military, there is hunger to innovate and a great willingness to take risk. You hit on a key term, this idea of dual use. And one of the things that has brought private capital in is the promise that defense-facing technologies can sometimes be proven out in the defense space first with a lower legal risk surface, particularly things like unmanned vehicles, AI decision systems, which in the commercial sector are going to face great legal pressures. They can do that with a little more safety on the military side, and then there's this huger commercial market that's waiting for them. So that makes it a lot easier to bring the investment in the first place. But I think the trust just comes down to getting the two communities together as often as we can, and in particular getting these new tools into the hands of the operators so that they can see how they operate and learn how they'll use them.
Do you see that happening in real life, Sigute, in Europe?
In Europe, probably the best tool to build the trust now is Ukraine or Brave One organization, for example, because what they see that often militaries ask if the tool has been tested in Ukraine or validated in Ukraine. And once you say that it is, I can see that the reliability of the tool becomes much, much higher, and then the military is much more open to also to look into it or to take it and test it by themselves. So Ukraine plays an important role now, but also I completely agree, trust is built via mutual cooperation, the step-by-step approach where actually military identifies unmet need, and then the technology developers and in cooperation with universities provide them solutions. And it might be not one case, it has to be like several iterations until you can see that you can trust the company, you can trust the people. And sometimes maybe also the security clearances and checks also help because it's very risky market. So I understand the military, why the military can't trust just so immediately, because especially in our countries where we face the threat from the aggressor which is nearby. So I understand why they are afraid to be very open, but at the same time we have to find a balance where you have to be open at a certain level that you help the technology to develop, because in the battlefield you need a technology that works, and you need a technology, a novel technology that you can fight the enemy with. So you can't do it just by yourself. The military by itself it can't do. You always need the technology in hand. So Ukraine is a critical point, but also the trust that you can build via cooperation.
And Sigute brought up a key point, this idea of classifying things. We've traditionally classified them too much, too early. The specific use case may need to be classified, but generally the technology doesn't. And in many cases, we want the adversaries to know the types of capabilities we're working on because it can have a deterrent effect if it's communicated properly. So same thing in the US. Overclassification is a chronic problem, and as often as not, it's a tool that's used to block rather than something that's really necessary.
I think it's exactly the same thing in academic research. I mean, we've been protective of our research writing, you know, getting the IPs right and all of that, which in many areas are relevant, but what really matters is actually pace and the quality of execution. That the same for the defense innovation, I presume. If you could grant one wish to Europe and to US to learn from the other systems, from whatever is out there, and not vis-a-vis each other, but globally. Scott, we were talking about China earlier, and particularly their understanding of the time horizon. What would be, just 1 minute, your wish that you could have embedded, learn from elsewhere, and import it to your system? Sigute, the same question for you. Scott.
I wish we could forget everything that came after about 1960. When you look at the beginning of the Cold War, we did some really incredibly smart, innovative things in partnership with our European allies. We did things like standardizing oils and lubricants, standardizing ammunition sizes, kind of focusing in specialization of warfare areas to economize resources. But at the same time, we allowed each nation to innovate in its platforms and its sensors and whatnot. And then it was easy to put together, easy to interoperate. At least on the US side, we didn't really win the Cold War. The Soviets just lost. We were never tested, but we came out of it with this sense of arrogance, I think, and this sense that we kind of had it all figured out. We need to go back and look at previous great challenges, how we faced them, and get back into that pattern of innovation, which was very much close partnership between allies, close partnership between government and industry, and between capital and startups and that whole cycle.
Do you think the just recent national defense strategy that was updated that would help to achieve that?
No comment.
Thanks, Sigute.
So my wish is basically to combine R&D with the procurement. So that it would be a systematic approach towards defense innovation promotion. That it should start with identification of unmet need of the military or security organizations. And then R&D projects should follow that unmet need. And then finally, it should be combined with a precise procurement in line that the startups do not need to wait for 10 years until they would be able to get into the planning for the procurement. So that would be the best approach, I think. And this is what we are lacking now, the cooperation between industry, universities, and military, which is essential, especially in small countries like Baltic states.
Excellent. If I may throw into this, and Scott, sorry for maybe being a bit provocative regarding the recent political changes. I think one of the things that is not sufficiently highlighted is the Europeans' capacity to actually tolerate what's the realpolitik or the realpolitik that happens in the field across the globe, and that's been advocated very well by the Finnish President Alexander Stubb with the rise of multilateralism. Are we able to embrace and understand that? Because it's a very different form of how you build your defense capabilities. And I think this panel clearly shows that while we have these differences, we clearly have also the opportunities how to work jointly, and we have to make sure that we are compliant with each other. Only then in alliance we can actually deter and fight off the real threats that happen there in the battlefield or in the hybrid space. Scott, Sigute, thank you very, very much. And we'll conclude our panel today. Thank you for watching, and it's over to you.